Professor, often a tangent here for Small Arms Defense Journal. We're in the classroom from Phoenix Defense, and we're working on the Kickstarter for the Vickers machine gun, prior to the images. And in conversation with Adam Forster over at Worldwide Arms and Richard Hamer over at Apex Gun Parts, it came out that Apex had a very large selection of original British armorer tools, and they needed identification. So Adam went through his listings, and I went through mine, and we were able to identify a very large amount of the armorer's gauges. Now, most of these are from the World War II era, and a lot of them are uncommon. They're not really things that you need to have to work on the gun. Fortunately, I know that most of the people watching this video that are Vickers collectors don't collect just what they need. They collect just about anything that might be having to do with a Vickers. And after I show you all these things, you're going to go, geez, I need to have that in my display. So we'll show you a little bit about it. First thing that happened was we got a bunch of the gauges in, and they were in their original preservative, which is a heavy wax, and we took them out, cleaned them up, and we sorted out, and we have SMLE rifle gauges. These are real solid armorer gauges, so if you're an SMLE guy, you're going to want these. We got rifle number 2 and number 8, and the .22 caliber, mostly the gauges for the bores. And then there's rifles number 4 and number 5 we have over here also. I did not clean these up. We'll give you a good pan on what they are, and we're going to give you a list of what these gauges were that we identified as British gauges that Apex Gun Parts has. So, going through a little bit, well, this isn't really, this is a Dishka tool. And another Dishka tool. Let me get these out of here. We were working on Dishkas earlier. So I don't want anyone to think I'd use those on a Vickers. I was thinking about the gauging, and I talking with Adam about it, and Adam made a note about some of the 1930s armor manuals that he's had access to, and I've seen this also, is the pattern 14 rifle, P14 rifle, 303, First World War. It actually uses a different gauge for head spacing than what you would use on an Enfield or any of the other SMLE or anything like that. So 303 gauges, when you're doing the P14, the gauge numbers are SM141, which is the minimum, and SM142, which is the maximum. And there is a slight difference between the construction of these gauges. So Apex Gun Parts did have those. I know they still have SM141, but if you're working with pattern 14, P14 rifles, you'll probably want to do that. What the hell was I talking about? Oh yeah, I was talking about the gauges that you're going to get from Apex because you need to have them. This one right here is, this one I can't remember the numbers on these. This is SM349. I know what it is, and what it's for is when you're working with rebarreling a gun, and you pull your lock, the connecting rod has to be a certain distance away from the face of the barrel. This slides over the connecting rod, fits into position, and then you present it to the barrel, to the chamber, and if it locks firmly, perfectly, you know that you've got the correct distance from the connecting rod to the face of the barrel. You can also measure that if you know what the measurement is, but it's a lot cooler to have a tool. So that's the first interesting tool that Apex had. The second one, this is kind of an unusual one, and it's more the kind of thing that you want to have in your display. Unless you're really, really working a lot on the Vickers guns. This is the test gauge for checking to see if the pins are going to fit properly to mount the gun. So this fits in the back. Slop in it, you know that you may have to change out the knuckle in the back that goes to the tripod. SM170 5 is the reject gland muzzle attachment. It sounds a little complicated, but basically what it is that the front gland, which is this item here, has a central hole in it that the barrel is riding in, and that hole can get extended. So in order to test it, what we have for the muzzle gland is we have SM175, which is a no-go gauge. If it goes into that hole, then you no-go the muzzle gland and use a new one because it will not give proper barrel support. This gauge here is SM183, and it's something that's really only going to be used for somebody who is actually building the guns. But, I mean, you need to have it in your display. I have one, so now you have to have one. Gauge SM183 is an inspection plate, and it's a reject for the diameter of the barrel bearing. Now the barrel bearing is inside behind the gland in here, and the gauge is something that advanced builders would use. When you take this apart and you check the gauge to see whether it's going to be rejected or not. This gauge here, SM346, this gauge is for putting on the face of the lock the extractor. It's used on the extractor for getting a proper seating and checking your extractor. And this gauge here, SM179, this is the lock pivot hole gauges. So when you have this apart, I'm not going to take it apart right now, when you have it apart you can check the actual body of the lock, you can check the holes in it here. Pretty handy to have when you're at a show somewhere like Knob Creek and you're picking it up. The SM117 is just your basic Vickers Armor's straight gauge, straight edge for every little thing that you need to do when you're working on it. These three gauges are kind of interesting. They're all barrel gauge, SM134, SM135, and SM348. They have a threaded end for going onto the brass cleaning rod that goes with your Vickers, or a steel cleaning rod that goes with it. Two of them are no-go gauges, and one of them is a bore push-through gauge to check to see if the bore will actually, if the bore is proper for firing .303 British. And last but not least, you have the spirit level gauge, which is the actual number for this is SM172, and this is used for laying barrel and trunnion when you're working on the gun.